Coming up today on LinkedIn News Live. Ask any successful person how they made it, and they'll likely bring up the people they had in their corner helping them. We'll speak to two experts on mentorship and networking on why the key to success is getting and maintaining lasting professional relationships. That and our poll coming up. Hello, I'm Caroline Fairchild, and this is LinkedIn News Live, where the business conversation begins with you. It's October 14th, and here's a quick look at the top stories that are trending right now on LinkedIn. If you thought about leaving your city at some point during this pandemic, well, you're not alone. Short-term moves spiked 27% between February and July, compared with the same time last year. That's according to data from the Postal Service. Most are leaving big cities where, like in San Francisco, rent prices are now falling by as much as 31%. That's a very big drop. And is the white-collar recession over? In September, the employment rate among Americans earning more than $60,000 a year rebounded within 1% of where it stood before the pandemic hit. That's according to tracktherecovery.org. Low-wage workers, those with annual incomes of less than $27,000, are still seeing employment gains 17.5% lower than pre-virus. The main differentiator, the ability for white-collar workers to work from home. We're also tracking seasonal hiring, and this year's holiday season is going to call for a new set of workers. Retailers will need to call more call centers and warehouse employees to meet increased demand for online shopping. Some retailers are adding perks like flexible hours and childcare to encourage virus-wary employees back into stores. National retail reporter for the Washington Post, Abba Bhattarai, shares on LinkedIn, even with 7.9% unemployment, more than double the US rate last year, retailers are raising wages to attract workers. Walmart, Target, and Best Buy have all boosted their hourly minimums to $15, while Hobby Lobby now starts full-timers at $17 an hour. For more stories like these, be sure to check out the news module to the right of your LinkedIn feed, or if you're in mobile, just click right into that search box. We've been polling professionals on the LinkedIn news page, and now we want to hear from you as well. Our poll today is about networking. It can be challenging during a pandemic. How are you doing it? A, online with people you know. B, virtually, meetups and conferences. C, in person and socially distanced. Or D, other. Let us know your vote in the stream right now, and we'll review the results of the poll at the end of today's show. There are many factors that contribute to career success, but after you've done the work and put in the hours, oftentimes the hardest step is just getting through the door. That's when having a mentor in your corner can be your greatest asset, someone to guide you, advise you, and go to bat for you. Joining us now is Steve Colon, CEO of Bottom Line, an organization that helps low-income and first-generation college students graduate and find their career path. Steve, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about why mentorship is so important, particularly early on in your career.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's super important, whether it's formal mentorship or informal mentorship. Those types of caring relationships, those types of support systems can encourage you when things get rough. They can help you navigate really sticky situations early on in your career, and also help you uncover opportunities that might exist for you that you weren't aware of, either through connections in their network or through opportunities that might exist in their institution. So when we think about mentorship, we really think about it as a coach or an advocate or an ally, somebody who has an authentic relationship with you built on trust that can be a big support for you. And like I said before, help you really navigate unfamiliar situations and connect to opportunities that were previously unknown to you.
And Bottom Line focuses on first generation to college students. What is the specific need there?
Yeah, I mean, there's been lots of research. You know, we focus on students who are college aspiring. They want bachelor's degree. They want a great first job, but they are faced with a system, a set of structures in front of them that really clutter their pathway forward. And one of those things that tend to be less available to students, particularly those who come from under-resourced backgrounds, is this idea of having mentors that are outside of your family unit. There have been some research that shows that students who are in the highest rung of the income bracket. Those individuals have, about 2/3 of them have access to quality, trusted relationships and mentors outside of their family unit. When you look at those who are in the lowest quartile of income, only about 1/3 of them have those types of opportunities. So it's another example in which, many of these best and brightest students that we have in our country, many of the students who aspire to have a college degree and a great career, are put at a disadvantage simply because of the lack of resources, and one of those resources is access to a mentor.
And of course, mentorship is just this big topic here on LinkedIn. It's such a buzzword as we're thinking about it. I see it all the time on LinkedIn. But what is mentorship? Break it down for us. What are the successful things that people need to do? What are the pillars?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, mentorship starts with consistency, caring, and an authentic relationship. The person has to trust you. We are, when you go to someone and you're asking them about how they would navigate situations or help you with their career, you have to have deep, authentic relationship that's based on trust. And so, first and foremost, that's about being mutually vulnerable, being able to share experiences, being able to talk about life, and really understand the aspirations and the dreams of the individual who you might be mentoring. So I think the biggest hallmark is someone who's caring, consistent, and trusted, and all the things that go with those types of authentic relationships. I think the second important thing that we have to constantly keep aware of is that as a mentor, part of your responsibility is to open up your network. Particularly during times like COVID, where getting out to networking events are difficult, mentors play an important role in connecting students, connecting folks to a wider range of individuals who can help them be successful in their career. There's been research that has shown that students who come from under-resourced communities tend to have stronger networks, but smaller networks, where folks who come from affluent backgrounds have broader networks to take advantage of. And so mentors can be really helpful in helping those individuals, helping early career individuals, helping students in college, build a strong network to help them sort of progress in their careers. So I think those are the two things, right? One is just an authentic relationship, and two, being really willing to open up your network with the folks that you're mentoring.
Well, Steve, I'm seeing some members in the stream who are very happy that you're willing to be with us on today's show. I'm going to say hi to Al from Boston, Jim from Denver, Diane from Kentucky, Linda from California, and Tim from Iowa. Thanks for joining us on LinkedIn News Live. I'm here with the CEO of Bottom Line, Steve Colon. Steve, talk to me a little bit about the success rate that you've seen. You've talked about the importance of mentorship. What are the people who are graduating from your program seeing?
Yeah, so our program in particular, we are seeing students, 75% of our students graduate within 6 years, and that is almost twice the rate of graduation that they would have, and similar members of their peer group have. And we're seeing upwards of 2/3 to 80% of them being gainfully employed or in graduate school within 6 months after graduation. And their starting salaries at those first jobs are often about twice what their family income was when they started with us. So our combination of coaching, advising, and mentoring is really demonstrating some real results. But there's been sort of plenty of research that demonstrate that mentors help individuals set more ambitious goals. Folks with mentors are more likely to graduate from college. Folks with mentors who had mentors growing up are more likely to be in leadership positions. So there's a wealth of benefits from having mentors. Personally, I can say myself that every major advancement I've ever had in my career and every position I've ever had, I've worked to build and maintain a network of mentors to help me navigate the intricacies that happen in anyone's career. They become really important guides along a pathway of being successful and achieving the dreams that you set for yourself.
Well, Kimberly is joining us in the stream, and she says mentors have always been vital in her career. Kimberly, thanks for joining us on today's show. Steve, I want to talk about the company component of this. I know from prior research from LinkedIn and McKinsey that first jump to manager is so critical in terms of setting you on the career success path. What can companies do to support employees that are a little bit greener?
Yeah, I think setting up formal and informal mentorship programs is critical, right? Companies should be thinking about when they bring new staff in, or when they're bringing new managers on and they're giving promotions, really helping to establish and set up mentorship opportunities, connecting them to folks both inside of the organization and outside of the organization who can be a vital asset to those individuals in those roles. Thinking about how you navigate it, when you're a manager, there's so many things, maybe you're a new manager, there's so many things you have to consider, right? And being able to talk to other managers, being able to talk to other folks who've faced similar issues, who've had to maneuver in uncertainty, who've had to address some complex issues in their careers, and having them give advice to you, as well as just being a supporter, a rooter, someone to be on your side, an ally, which is really critical, because many of us, when we take on those first big new roles, often feel like, a bit of an imposter. It's our first time doing it. We're unsure how to operate. We're maybe not sure that we can do the job. And just having someone to be your champion, someone to be an ally, someone to be supportive of you is so critical in giving you that confidence to move forward. And if they can match that with some of their lived experience, it really does give you a leg up in your career. And so companies and organizations should really look to establish formal and informal mentorship processes, both for new employees and for folks who get promoted inside of the organization.
Well, Steve, I hope that more people joining us in this stream choose to be that champion and ally for someone within their company. Thank you for the work that you're doing and for joining us on LinkedIn News Live.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate being here.
That was Steve Colon. He is the CEO of Bottom Line, talking to us about the importance of mentoring, particularly during a pandemic. If you think about career success like raising a child, it takes a village. The second component of that is the village, which in the case of your career is your network. But networking can be challenging, particularly during a pandemic and particularly for women. We have new data out from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which shows that women are leaving the workforce at an alarming rate during this pandemic. In September, 80%, yes, I said 80% of those who left their jobs were women. Joining us now to discuss this is Yale professor Marissa King. Marissa, break down for us what's going on here. I researched and you write about this, and that September stat really threw me. What's happening?
Yeah, it's absolutely disheartening. And if you think about retention in companies and staying in the labor force, there are a number of challenges that women in particular are facing. Our networks are absolutely critical for our ability to find work-life balance. They're critical for our productivity, but they're also critical for retention. And one of the key challenges that women are facing right now is how to stay in the workforce. And there's, on the one front, there's just the tension of simply how do you get this work done, but also that we know that our networks and our relationships at work have a key role in retention at work. Employees who report having at least even just one close friend at work are 7 times more engaged with their job, and they're much less likely to turn over. So this working during the pandemic has really created a double hit in the sense that we're isolated, and many of the things that would keep us engaged at work, particularly our colleagues, are feeling more distant. So we're taking hits on all sides.
And you've written a book that's being released in January about how female networks are shrinking amid the pandemic. That's also frightening. What can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. So if we look at how networks are changing over time, women's networks in many ways are fundamentally different than men's. Both men and women tend to disproportionately have the same gender represented. So women have more women in their networks and men have more men. And that started to change over time. One of the upsides, I would say, one of the few upsides or silver linings about the current situation is we know actually when people are interacting online, there's been studies even on the platform LinkedIn, looking at when people are interacting online, they actually tend to interact with people of the other gender much more frequently. So we're actually on the positive side, we're seeing greater gender diversity in interactions, which is creating some opportunity. But the real problem is the lack of support. And if we think about it from that front, it's really our deeper ties and our closer connections are suffering. And that's what leading to increased disengagement at work and also exit from the labor force.
And break down some of the gender differences with networking. Are women better at it than men? We talk a lot about how women are more collaborative in the workplace. How does that impact networking specifically?
Yeah, other than differences in just representation, one of the biggest differences is that women's networks tend to be much more segregated. If you look at women's networks, women tend to keep their home life and their work life separate. So their friends from the soccer field or their friends from the gardening club are actually completely distinct from their work lives. And for men, that's simply not true. Men's work and social lives overlap much more. On the one hand, for men, this creates a strong advantage in the sense they have to network less. For women, they're essentially having to do much more work because they're maintaining 2 separate spheres. historically for women, this has actually been quite beneficial because that separation between their home and work lives has been associated with an increased sense of work-life balance. But one of the challenges during COVID is that separation is no longer possible. So that separation, which has historically really been beneficial for helping increase work-life balance, is no longer possible. And so that's been one of the difficulties that women's networks in particular have faced during this time.
And that separation is just hurting working women on basically all fronts, the lack of that separation, I should say. Lena and McKinsey came out with a study recently that found that women are 1.5 times more likely than men right now to downshift in their careers. It's also the first time in 7 years that they've done this study that women are more likely to leave the workforce than men. Marissa, how do we change this?
Yeah, that finding is absolutely just disheartening. The notion that we may be losing 1 in 4 women from our workforce is just terrifying. And I think if you dig into some of that research, one of the key things that seems to be happening is in part it's due just to structural constraints that we don't have control necessarily over when and how we're working, and that's become even more problematic. But aside from these structural constraints, one of the things that women are reporting is that they actually don't feel as if they have someone that they can share their burden or their difficulty to at work. And that inability to share their experience is also creating a further sense of isolation and separation. And while we can't necessarily control many things about work in our current working environment, everyone has some degree over their ability to control their relationships. So thinking about what you can do in terms of your network and your relationships to shore up support right now is absolutely critical.
Yeah, that's great advice. I'm going to go ahead and say hello to some members on the stream right now. Sherry from Nevada, excuse me, Andrew from Florida, Anna from North Carolina, and Larissa from Vancouver are joining us. Thanks for joining us on LinkedIn News Live. I want to bring up the poll that we have for the members in the stream today as well. How are you networking right now? I'm not doing a very good job at it personally. Are you A, online doing it with people you know, B, virtually meetups and conferences, C, in person and socially distanced, or D, other? Let us know your vote in the stream and reveal the results of the poll at the end of today's show. Okay, Marissa, for those who are thinking about networking right now, what's the best way to do it?
Yeah, and thinking about your network right now, it's an extraordinarily difficult time to be growing your network. But what we know from a huge range of research, depending on no matter what your goal is, whether it's to become happier, more fulfilled, increase more work-life balance, excel in your career, most of those outcomes don't depend actually on the size of your network. So just having a larger network isn't necessarily going to help. It's really the quality and the structure of your connections that are going to make a difference. So if we're thinking about a trade-off of how you're spending your time, the answer is certainly not to be networking more. It's to think more purposefully about how you're cultivating your existing connections. And there's a wide body of research. A lot of it was done at Rutgers by Dan Levin that has found that actually activating your existing network is a much more effective strategy in terms of both generating new ideas, finding new job leads, and also just increasing a sense of trust and social support. So right now, the key really should be focusing on maintaining and activating your existing network, not trying to figure out how you can grow it.
And I've been speaking a little bit about the Lena and McKinsey study, which came out a couple weeks ago, but I wanted to get your take on one of the stats, which is senior women are much more likely actually than their male peers to be doing mentoring right now of younger women in the workplace. If that's the case, why are networks still shrinking for women?
Yeah, so I mean, the hard thing is oftentimes when mentorship and particularly sponsorship programs are focused on women sponsoring women, which is actually just putting more burden on women. So asking women to carry the weight of the women's networks is really difficult. And so the idea, I think, is to try to think beyond just trying to rely on senior women to be helping senior women. We actually know that cross-gender mentorship and sponsorship programs actually are much more beneficial. And so right now, it's really coming together as a community and a collectivity. Like, we cannot solve this problem one-on-one, but it's got to be a share. We've all got to come together to figure out how we can connect.
Absolutely. Now I'm going to ask you to take out your crystal ball a little bit. What are your hopes in terms of some of the long-term impacts of this pandemic on the working world? What are you hopeful about?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the past few months have been a time of just extraordinary isolation and extraordinary stress. And my hope is that we are coming to realize just how important relationships are, both for our mental well-being, but also for our productivity and ability to continue to function as a healthy society and a healthy organization. So I hope, as difficult as this time has been, it's called attention to just how critical our relationships are, and will provide a forum for us to start to come together after we've been apart for so long.
Well, I share that hope as well. Marissa, thank you so much for joining us on LinkedIn News Live. I sure learned a lot from our conversation. I can see from the stream, so have our members as well.
Thanks for having me, Caroline.
That was Marissa King. She's a Yale professor talking to us about how female networks are shrinking during this pandemic and what we can do to change that. I want to thank her, as well as Steve Colon from Bottom Line, for joining us on LinkedIn News Live. Now is the time we've all been waiting for, which is to reveal the results of today's poll, which is about networking. How are you doing it right now? We see that almost half of you say that you're doing it online. We have votes in the stream from Shantice, Martha, Michelle, and Aaron. Andrea says, online with people I know and new LinkedIn connections. There's been more openness to connecting and reaching out during the pandemic. 32% say digitally. Dolores, Jessica, Sharon, and Sarah are saying that. And then unsure where to start, Stephanie, Jose, and John. Well, if you still are unsure where to start, be sure to watch the show. We have some great tips from Marissa as well as Steve. On tomorrow's show, we are celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. We have a great show lined up for you. We're speaking with Bain & Co.'s Hernan Sanez on the economic powerhouse that is the Latinx community. And I sit down with the creator of the first Latina Marvel superhero to star in an ongoing series. I'm Caroline Fairchild. This is LinkedIn News Live. I'll see you tomorrow.